The police sirens wailed through the afternoon air as two squad cars screeched into the parking lot of Meadowbrook Grocery. Officer Martinez stepped out first, his hand instinctively moving to his radio as he surveyed the scene. A crowd had gathered near the store entrance, their voices rising in heated discussion. In the center of the commotion, a middle-aged woman with perfectly styled blonde hair stood pointing dramatically at a young man seated in a wheelchair, her face flushed with indignation. "That's him. That's the one who assaulted me." Karen Whitfield's voice cut through the murmur of the crowd like a blade. Her manicured finger trembled as she gestured toward Marcus Johnson, a 28-year-old man whose calm demeanor seemed to contrast sharply with the chaos surrounding him. Marcus sat quietly in his wheelchair, his hands folded in his lap, confusion and hurt evident in his dark eyes. Officer Martinez approached cautiously, his partner, Officer Chen, flanking him. The crowd parted reluctantly, many of them regular customers who had witnessed the incident unfold. Mrs. Patterson, an elderly woman who had been shopping for her weekly groceries, clutched her purse tighter as she watched the officers approach Marcus. "Sir, we're going to need you to come with us," Officer Martinez said, his voice professional but firm. "There's been a report of assault." Marcus looked up, his brow furrowed with genuine bewilderment. He had been having such a good day too. His best friend David had asked him to help with grocery shopping for their upcoming game night, and Marcus had been happy to assist. The simple act of helping a friend had somehow spiraled into this nightmare. "I'm sorry, officer, but I think there's been a misunderstanding," Marcus replied, his voice steady despite the tremor of anxiety beneath it. "I haven't hurt anyone. I was just helping my friend shop for groceries." Karen stepped forward, her designer handbag clutched to her chest like a shield. She had perfected this performance over the years, knowing exactly how to modulate her voice to sound both vulnerable and authoritative. Her eyes gleamed with the satisfaction of someone who had never been challenged, never been told no. "Don't let him fool you, officers," she said, her voice dripping with false sincerity. "He deliberately rammed his wheelchair into my cart, and when I asked him to be more careful, he became aggressive and struck me with his hand. I have witnesses." The crowd stirred uneasily. Several shoppers exchanged glances, their expressions ranging from skepticism to outright disbelief. David Chen, Marcus's friend, pushed through the crowd, his face pale with shock. "That's not what happened at all," David protested, his voice breaking slightly. "Marcus was helping me reach something on the top shelf. He never touched her cart, and he certainly didn't hit anyone." But Karen was already in full performance mode. She had dealt with David's type before young, idealistic, thinking they could challenge her authority. She had been the president of the Meadowbrook Homeowners Association for 8 years, and she knew how to handle troublemakers. "His friend would say anything to protect him," Karen declared, her voice rising to ensure everyone could hear. "I'm a respected member of this community. I've lived here for 20 years, and I've never had any problems with anyone before. Why would I lie about something like this?" Officer Martinez felt the familiar weight of a complicated situation settling on his shoulders. He had been a police officer for 15 years, and he had learned to read people. Something about this woman's story felt off. But he also knew that false accusations were serious business. The crowd was growing restless, and he needed to maintain order. "Ma'am, can you tell us exactly what happened?" Officer Chen asked, pulling out his notepad. Karen straightened her shoulders and launched into her prepared narrative. She had spent the 20 minutes before the police arrived crafting her story, ensuring every detail would paint Marcus as the aggressor and herself as the innocent victim. I was shopping peacefully in aisle 7, looking for pasta sauce for my family's dinner, she began, her voice taking on a rehearsed quality. This man came wheeling down the aisle at an unsafe speed. His wheelchair collided with my cart, causing several items to fall. When I politely asked him to be more careful, he became belligerent and used profanity. Then, he deliberately struck me with his hand, causing me to fall against the shelf. Mrs. Patterson, who had been shopping in the same aisle, couldn't contain herself any longer. At 73 years old, she had seen enough injustice in her lifetime to recognize it when it happened right in front of her. "That's not true," she called out, her voice stronger than her frail appearance suggested. "I saw the whole thing. This young man was being polite and helpful. She's the one who was rude." Karen's composed mask slipped for just a moment, a flash of anger crossing her features before she quickly composed herself. She had not expected resistance from the elderly woman, but she had dealt with worse challenges before. "I'm afraid the elderly woman is confused," Karen said with practiced condescension. "She was quite far away and probably didn't see clearly. I, on the other hand, was directly involved in the incident." The crowd began to murmur more loudly. Other shoppers who had witnessed the incident were starting to speak up, their voices creating a chorus of contradiction to Karen's story. But Officer Martinez knew that eyewitness testimony could be unreliable, especially in emotional situations like this. "Sir, I'm going to need you to come with us for questioning," he said to Marcus, his tone apologetic but firm. "We need to sort this out properly." Marcus felt his heart sinking. He had experienced discrimination before, but never anything like this. The assumption that he was somehow dangerous or aggressive simply because he was different cut deeper than any physical wound could. "Officer, I understand you're doing your job," Marcus said, his voice carrying a dignity that impressed even Officer Martinez. "But I want you to know that I have never hurt anyone in my life. I was raised to treat everyone with respect, regardless of how they treat me." As the officers began to approach Marcus, the crowd's protests grew louder. David stepped closer to his friend, his hands shaking with anger and helplessness. "This is wrong," David shouted. "You're arresting the wrong person. She's lying." Karen felt a surge of triumph. Everything was going according to plan. She had successfully positioned herself as the victim and Marcus as the aggressor. The police were taking her side, just as she had expected they would. But then, a new voice cut through the chaos. Tom Williams, the store manager, had been watching the commotion from his office window. He was a man in his 50s who had worked in retail for most of his adult life, and he had seen enough false accusations to recognize the signs. "Officers, before you make any arrests, I think you should see something," Tom said, his voice calm but urgent. "We have security cameras that cover every aisle in the store. Everything that happened was recorded." The crowd fell silent. Karen's face went pale, and for the first time since the incident began, she looked genuinely afraid. She had not considered the possibility of video evidence. In all her years of manipulating situations to her advantage, she had never been caught on camera. That's not necessary," Karen stammered, her confident demeanor cracking. "I've already told you what happened. Why would you need to review footage when you have a clear victim statement?" But Officer Martinez was already nodding to the store manager. His instincts had been right. Something about this woman's story hadn't added up, and now they might have the evidence to prove it. "We'd very much like to see that footage, sir," Officer Martinez said. "It could help us understand exactly what happened." The crowd began to shift, sensing that the tide was turning. Mrs. Patterson smiled grimly, knowing that justice might finally be served. David squeezed Marcus's shoulder, hope beginning to replace the despair that had been consuming him. Tom Williams gestured toward the store entrance. The small office behind the customer service counter housed the security monitoring system, and he had a feeling that what they were about to see would change everything. "Right this way, officers," Tom said. "I think you're going to find this very interesting." As the group moved toward the store, Karen felt panic rising in her chest. She had built her entire adult life on the ability to manipulate situations through her status and perceived authority. The thought of being exposed as a liar in front of the entire community was terrifying. "I really don't think this is necessary," she said, her voice becoming shrill. "I've already provided my statement. Surely that should be enough." But the officers were already following Tom into the store, and the crowd was right behind them. Marcus wheeled himself alongside David, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and hope. For the first time since this ordeal began, he felt like the truth might actually come to light. The security office was cramped, with multiple monitors displaying feeds from cameras throughout the store. Tom quickly navigated to the recorded footage from aisle 7, his fingers moving expertly across the keyboard. "Here we are," Tom said, pointing to one of the monitors. "This is the footage from about 30 minutes ago." The black and white image showed a clear view of aisle 7. Marcus could be seen in his wheelchair, reaching up to help David get a jar of pasta sauce from a high shelf. His movements were careful and deliberate, showing none of the reckless behavior that Karen had described. Karen appeared in the frame, walking briskly down the aisle with her cart. She seemed to be in a hurry, and her attention was focused on her phone rather than her surroundings. As she approached the area where Marcus and David were shopping, she didn't slow down or attempt to navigate around them. "Watch this part carefully," Tom said, pointing to the screen. The footage showed Karen's cart bumping into Marcus's wheelchair, not the other way around. Marcus turned to look at her, and they could see him mouth what appeared to be "I'm sorry," even though the collision had not been his fault. Karen's reaction was immediate and aggressive, her mouth moving rapidly as she gestured angrily at Marcus. Officer Martinez leaned closer to the screen, his expression growing more serious. The video was telling a completely different story than the one Karen had provided. "Can you enhance the audio?" Officer Chen asked. "Unfortunately, our cameras don't record sound," Tom replied, "but I think the visual evidence speaks for itself." The footage continued to play, showing Marcus remaining calm throughout Karen's tirade. At no point did he raise his hand toward her, nor did he make any aggressive movements. In fact, he appeared to be trying to de-escalate the situation, his body language suggesting he was apologizing and trying to move away. Then came the moment that made everyone in the room gasp. Karen, apparently realizing that her verbal assault wasn't having the desired effect, suddenly stumbled backward and fell against the shelf, knocking several items to the floor. "She did that on purpose, Mrs. Patterson whispered, her voice filled with disgust. "She staged the whole thing." The footage showed Karen looking around quickly, as if to make sure no one had witnessed her deception. Then, she began to position herself as if she had been knocked down by Marcus, arranging her clothing and hair to look disheveled. Officer Martinez turned to look at Karen, his expression stern. In his 15 years of law enforcement, he had seen many false accusations, but rarely one so brazenly fabricated and captured on video. "Ma'am, this footage directly contradicts your statement," he said, his voice carrying the weight of official authority. "The video shows that you bumped into Mr. Johnson's wheelchair, not the other way around. It also shows that he never touched you, and that you deliberately fell against the shelf. Karen's face went through several changes of expression, from shock to denial, to a desperate attempt to maintain her story. She had never been confronted with irrefutable evidence of her lies before, and she was struggling to process the reality of her situation. "That video must be wrong," she said, her voice becoming increasingly desperate. "The angle is bad. You can't see everything that happened. I know what I experienced." But Officer Chen was already reaching for his handcuffs. The evidence was clear, and filing a false police report was a serious crime. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to turn around and put your hands behind your back," Officer Chen said. "You're under arrest for filing a false police report." The crowd that had gathered outside the security office erupted in cheers and applause. Marcus felt tears of relief streaming down his face as David embraced him tightly. "You have the right to remain silent," Officer Chen continued, beginning the Miranda warning as he placed Karen in handcuffs. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Karen's carefully constructed facade finally crumbled completely. The woman who had spent years intimidating and manipulating others was now facing the consequences of her actions for the first time in her adult life. "This is a mistake," she screamed, her voice no longer controlled and authoritative, but shrill and desperate. "I'm a respected member of this community. I'm the president of the Homeowners Association. You can't treat me like this." But her protests fell on deaf ears. The officers led her toward the exit, past the crowd of shoppers who had witnessed her deception. Many of them were people she had bullied and intimidated over the years, and they watched with satisfaction as she was finally held accountable. "Mrs. Patterson approached Marcus with tears in her eyes. She had lived through the civil rights movement and understood the significance of this moment better than most. "I'm so sorry this happened to you, young man," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "But I'm proud of how you handled yourself. You showed more dignity in this situation than many people would have." Marcus wiped his eyes and smiled at the elderly woman. Despite everything he had been through, he found himself feeling grateful for the support of the community and the vindication that the truth had brought. "Thank you, Mrs. Patterson," he said. "Your support meant everything to me. I was beginning to think no one would believe me." Tom Williams approached the group with a serious expression. As a store manager, he had seen too many instances of discrimination and false accusations, and he wanted to make sure this incident was handled properly. "Mr. Johnson, I want to formally apologize on behalf of Meadowbrook Grocery," Tom said. "This should never have happened, and I want to make sure you know that you're always welcome here. In fact, I'd like to offer you a job if you're interested. We could use someone with your character and integrity on our team." The crowd applauded again, and Marcus felt overwhelmed by the outpouring of support. What had started as the worst day of his life was turning into something unexpectedly positive. I don't know what to say," Marcus replied, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you. That means more than you know." Officer Martinez approached Marcus and David, his expression apologetic. He had learned an important lesson about the danger of making assumptions and the importance of thorough investigation. "Mr. Johnson, I want to apologize for how this situation was handled initially," he said. "We should have looked at the evidence before making any assumptions. I hope you can forgive us." Marcus nodded, his natural capacity for forgiveness shining through despite what he had endured. He understood that the officers had been doing their job, and he didn't want to hold grudges against people who were genuinely trying to make things right. Officer Martinez, I appreciate your apology, Marcus said. I know you were just responding to a call. I'm just glad the truth came out. As the immediate crisis passed, the broader implications of what had happened began to sink in. David pulled out his phone and began scrolling through social media, his eyes widening as he saw what was happening online. Marcus, you need to see this, David said, showing him his phone screen. Someone live-streamed the whole thing. The video is going viral, and people are calling you a hero. Marcus looked at the screen with amazement. Comments were pouring in from people around the world, expressing support and admiration for his dignity and grace under pressure. I don't feel like a hero, Marcus said quietly. I just tried to handle a bad situation with as much dignity as I could manage. That's exactly why you are a hero, Mrs. Patterson said, patting his shoulder gently. You showed all of us how to respond to injustice with grace and strength. In the days that followed, the story continued to spread. The security footage was released publicly, showing the stark contrast between Karen's lies and the reality of what had happened. The video became a powerful symbol of how false accusations could destroy lives and how important it was to seek the truth before making judgments. Karen's arrest made local news, and the additional charges kept mounting. It was discovered that she had a history of making false complaints against neighbors, particularly those who were different from her in some way. The Homeowners Association voted her out of office, and several civil rights organizations reached out to Marcus to offer support. Marcus took the job at Meadowbrook Grocery, where he quickly became one of the most popular employees. Customers would specifically seek him out, not just for his helpful nature, but because they had been inspired by his story and wanted to show their support. The incident also sparked broader conversations about disability rights and the presumption of innocence. Marcus found himself reluctantly thrust into the role of an advocate, speaking at community events and sharing his story to help others understand the challenges faced by people with disabilities. I never wanted to be a public figure, Marcus told a local reporter several weeks later. But if my experience can help prevent someone else from going through what I went through, then I'm willing to share my story. The legal proceedings against Karen moved forward swiftly. The video evidence was so clear that her lawyer advised her to accept a plea deal rather than go to trial. She was sentenced to community service, a fine, and was required to attend sensitivity training about disability rights. Perhaps most importantly, the incident had brought the community together in an unexpected way. People who had never spoken to each other before were now united in their commitment to creating a more inclusive and just society. Mrs. Patterson became a regular customer at the grocery store, always stopping to chat with Marcus and David. She had also become an advocate for disability rights, using her status as a respected community elder to challenge discrimination wherever she encountered it. You know, young man, she said to Marcus one afternoon as he helped her with her groceries. What happened to you was terrible, but something good came out of it. This community is better now because of how you handled yourself. Marcus smiled as he loaded her bags into her car. He had learned that, even in the darkest moments, there was always the possibility of light breaking through. I think you're right, Mrs. Patterson, he said. Sometimes the worst experiences teach us the most important lessons. As the months passed, the immediate intensity of the incident faded, but its impact continued to resonate. Marcus had become a symbol of dignity in the face of injustice, and his story continued to inspire people around the world. The security footage had been viewed millions of times, and the contrast between Karen's lies and Marcus's truth had become a powerful reminder of the importance of seeking facts before making judgments. It had also highlighted the ongoing challenges faced by people with disabilities and the need for society to confront its prejudices. Karen, for her part, had largely disappeared from public view. The humiliation of being exposed as a liar had cost her not only her position of authority, but also many of her friendships and her reputation in the community. Some said she had moved to another state, unable to face the consequences of her actions. But Marcus chose not to dwell on Karen's fate. He had learned that holding on to anger and resentment only hurt himself, and he preferred to focus on the positive changes that had come from his experience. The grocery store had become a gathering place for the community, and Marcus found himself at the center of a network of people who were committed to creating positive change. He had started a weekly support group for people with disabilities, and the meetings were always well attended. "I never imagined that something so terrible could lead to something so beautiful," Marcus told the group one evening. "But I've learned that communities are stronger when they support each other, especially when it's difficult." The ripple effects of that day continued to spread. Other businesses in the area had implemented better training for their employees about disability rights, and several organizations had been formed to combat discrimination and false accusations. David, who had witnessed his friend's ordeal firsthand, had become an advocate in his own right. He had started a blog about the incident and its aftermath, using his platform to educate others about the importance of standing up for what's right. "I learned that day that silence in the face of injustice is complicity," David wrote in one of his blog posts. "When I saw my friend being falsely accused, I knew I had to speak up, even if it was uncomfortable." The officers involved in the incident had also learned valuable lessons. Officer Martinez had become an advocate for better training in handling disability-related calls, and he often used Marcus's story as an example in his presentations to other law enforcement officers. "This incident taught me the importance of gathering all the facts before making any assumptions," Officer Martinez told a group of rookie officers. "We have a responsibility to seek the truth, not just respond to accusations." As the anniversary of the incident approached, Marcus found himself reflecting on how much his life had changed. What had started as a simple trip to help a friend with grocery shopping had become a catalyst for community transformation and personal growth. The grocery store decided to hold a community appreciation event on the anniversary, celebrating not just Marcus's courage, but the way the community had come together to support justice and inclusion. People from all walks of life attended, united in their commitment to creating a more fair and compassionate society. "A year ago, I thought my life was over," Marcus told the crowd that had gathered for the event. "But I've learned that sometimes our greatest challenges become our greatest opportunities to make a positive difference in the world." Mrs. Patterson, now in her 70s, but still sharp and determined, stood up to address the crowd. Her voice carried the weight of someone who had witnessed decades of social change and understood the significance of moments like this. "I've lived through many changes in this community," she said, her voice strong and clear. "But I've never been more proud of how we came together to support what's right. Marcus showed us all what courage looks like, and we showed him what community support can accomplish." The applause that followed was thunderous, but Marcus felt most moved by the individual conversations he had throughout the evening. Person after person approached him to share how his story had inspired them to stand up against discrimination in their own lives. A young mother told him how she had used his example to teach her children about treating everyone with respect. A business owner explained how he had changed his hiring practices to be more inclusive. A college student shared how Marcus's story had inspired her to change her major to disability advocacy. "I never intended to become a role model," Marcus confided to David as the evening wound down. "But I'm grateful that something positive came from such a difficult experience." "That's what makes you a true hero," David replied. "You didn't choose to be put in that situation, but you chose how to respond to it, and your response has made all the difference." As the community celebration ended and people began to head home, Marcus remained for a few minutes in the grocery store where it all began. The aisle where he had been falsely accused looked exactly the same, but everything else had changed. Tom Williams approached him with a smile. The store manager had become not just Marcus's employer, but a genuine friend and advocate. "You know, Marcus," Tom said, "when I first showed those officers the security footage, I thought we were just solving one problem. I had no idea we were starting a movement." Marcus nodded, understanding the profound truth in those words. Sometimes the most important changes begin with a single act of courage, a single moment of standing up for what's right. "I think that's how all real change happens," Marcus replied. "One person decides to do the right thing, and then others join them. Before you know it, you have a community that's committed to justice and inclusion." As Marcus wheeled himself toward the exit, he paused to look back at the store that had become so much more than just a place to buy groceries. It had become a symbol of hope, a reminder that truth will always prevail over lies, and that communities can come together to support what's right. The automatic doors slid open, and Marcus emerged into the cool evening air. Above him, the stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky, and he felt a deep sense of peace and purpose. His phone buzzed with a text message from Mrs. Patterson. "Thank you for showing us all what courage looks like. Sleep well, knowing that you've made the world a little bit better." Marcus smiled as he read the message, knowing that, while his journey had been difficult, it had led to something beautiful and lasting. The truth had not only set him free, but had freed an entire community to become the best version of itself. As he made his way home, Marcus reflected on the lesson he had learned that injustice may be swift, but justice, when it comes, is thorough and transformative. The security footage had revealed more than just the truth about one incident. It had revealed the truth about the power of community, the importance of standing up for what's right, and the possibility of redemption even in the darkest circumstances. The story of that day would continue to be told for years to come, not just as a cautionary tale about the dangers of false accusations, but as an inspiring reminder that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when they choose to stand on the side of truth and justice. And at the center of it all was Marcus Johnson, a young man who had faced his darkest hour with dignity and grace, and in doing so, had illuminated the path forward for an entire community. The legacy of that day lived on in the changed hearts and minds of everyone who had witnessed it, a testament to the enduring power of truth and the unbreakable strength of communities united in the cause of justice.